Hi, this is Rutger from River, and I'm going to show you how to assemble a DIY Crux voltage controlled amplifier module. So let's see what's in the box. First of all, you have a power cable. We need that later. You have a bag of parts, and you have this anti-static bag with front panel and a circuit board inside. Before you handle this circuit board, make sure you took precautions against static electricity, so you don't damage the components that are already mounted on the board. And let's have a look at the board. As you can see, the very small surface mount components were already assembled in a factory. So that saves you the pain of soldering those by hand, because that's nearly impossible. But there are a few components that you can solder by hand, and those are in the bag. Let's briefly walk through what you have here. First of all, you have these 8 mini jack sockets with washers and nuts to attach them to the front panel. There's 4 of these push button switches with 4 black round caps to go on. There's a brass standoff, 2 M3 screws, and a power connector for the Eurorack format. So before we start soldering, let's have a look at the front of this. You can recognize the front by the 2 capacitors here for the power, and the places for the power for the mini jack sockets. And you can recognize the back because of all the logos and the do not dispose signs. So let's begin with the power socket, which goes onto the back here. Insert it through the holes, turn over the board and solder it on the front side of the board. After you've done 1 or 2 joints, make sure it's straight, and it is in this case, so you can do the remaining solder joints. And please check all the solder joints you made, just to be sure that they are alright. So let's proceed now to the push button switches. And these go in a certain orientation, which you can recognize by this small plastic white clip, which is only on one side of the switch. And it goes pointing upwards to the power connection of the module. So here is one on the front going in, another one on the front going in. Make sure they're in straight, so you don't get problems with lining up the holes of the front panel with these switches. Now you can solder them on the back side. So the next thing we're going to do is attach these button caps to the push buttons. I found it easiest when you have the slot on the side, and you can simply press them on, but it's easier if you tilt them a little bit backwards, so you sort of make this motion while pressing. And it requires a bit of force to get them over the heads of the switches, but please make sure that you don't use excessive force and break the switch heads. So that's those. Then let's attach the standoff, and the standoff comes on the front of the circuit board, and the screw goes on the back through the hole. Use a small screwdriver and doesn't have to be really tight, just enough to not make it go loose on vibrating motions. So then it's time to fit the sockets, the mini jack sockets, and these have 3 pins. 2 of them are very close together, and they go pointing downward on the circuit board. And just put them in, but don't solder them yet, because you want to have them aligned properly with the holes on the front panel. And the best way to ensure that is to use the front panel before you solder them. So you put on the front panel, and when you press it down, you see that there's still a gap between the sockets and the panel. That's not a nice alignment. So you want to wiggle these sockets. And that takes some time to get right. But you want to wiggle these sockets until you get the front panel lying on these square bits of the sockets properly. Now that's better. As you can see on this side, the gap is now closed and the front panel lies on these sockets firmly, on the other side as well. So I want to hold the front panel in place now and solder these sockets, but that's a little bit tricky. So what I usually do is I use something to put my solder wire on and have it stick out in the air, and then put the circuit board underneath, and from there solder these points. If this is a bit tricky, you can also apply some temporary solder. Just a few solder joints is enough to hold these sockets in place and then finish them off later. So now the sockets are soldered and firmly in place, you can put on the front panel, and as you can see, it fits nicely onto the sockets as they are all lined up correctly. You can attach it with the screw on the top into the standoff, and here you can use the washers and the nuts to attach the front panel to the circuit board and to the sockets. Now I recommend that you tighten the nuts by hand first, as far as you can, and then you can further tighten them by using this kind of tool. I think it's called a wrench socket, and you can leave out the wrench bit because you don't really need that much force. You only need the force that you can apply by hand on this. And I strongly urge you to make something like this, a paper mold. You can also use cardboard or plastic, that you can put in between your tool and your front panel, because you really don't want to scratch the paint on these text labels or make other markings while you apply a bit of force to tighten these. It doesn't have to be really tight, just tight enough to not get loose. So that's it, one crux done. And now it's time to put it in your rack and test it. It doesn't require calibration, but please make sure if you attach it to your power supply that you put in the cable in the correct orientation. It's marked here on the circuit board, red stripe goes here, so it goes on the socket like this. And the other side also, you have to pay attention to how you mount it on your bus board. Thank you.